Hello, 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 and welcome to the Painter by Quarterly Slush Pile. We're so glad that you've chosen, out of all the many podcasts out there, to listen to us for a bit. Excuse my bit of a cold here. All these weather fluctuations we're having, it's fall in the Northeast. Um, but we're really happy that we've got a full house of staff ready to discuss some poetry today. And I'm Kathleen Volkmiller, and I'm zooming in from my home, and I'm going to zoom up to Jason.
Hi, it is Jason Schneiderman. I'm in lovely New York. We're on fire, literally. We have fires in Prospect Park and Inwood Park. Um, and so just, if you thought you were like metaphorically on fire, we're literally on fire. And I'll toss it down to Lisa.
Hey, this is Lisa Zirkle. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we are not literally on fire, but we're humidly on fire. So I'll take that, which is odd for November. We're still sweating down here. But, glad to be here with all of you great folks talking about poetry. And I will zip it over to Sam.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Nukebauer, and I'm here at NYU's DC campus. And since we're on the theme of weather, I'll say it's starting to feel like fall here, which makes me happy. And I'm going to shoot it up to Davina.
Hi, I'm Davina, located in Philly, currently very cold and not to my liking. It's a bit gloomy outside. I wish there was a little bit of sun, but I'm still very, very happy to be here. And I think I will pass it to Jess.
Hey, it's Jess. I'm also currently in Philadelphia, at Drexel University. And yeah, it is a bit chilly today. I was walking to campus and I felt the breeze and I was like, "Oh, it's finally fall," because recently it's been really the weather's been fluctuating like crazy. So it's I think we're finally in the cold weather now. So I'll pass it to Dagny.
Oh, thanks, Jess. Dagny Forrest here, just outside of Ottawa, Canada. I'm at my home and not on fire, but we have wood stove and start having fires at this time of the year, so we can choose fire. Yeah.
Well, Dagny, you lived through some bad fires last year for sure.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, oh, gosh, yeah. The amount of burning that Canada has rolled into the world is just kind of staggering. Yeah.
Yeah. I think here where it has not rained in more than a month. And it did finally rain last night. So that's it. We had wildfires in New Jersey. It woke everybody up at 3 or 4 in the morning from the smell. We were sure
Oh,
we had a
yeah.
gas leak. We even called the public utility people because there was something chemically about it.
Mm.
But the
Yeah.
man was really nice. Like when he got out of the van, it was 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And he says he gets out of the van and goes, "You're fine. I think you're smelling the wildfires. I think you're fine." But he still like walked through the house with the tester. So
I
Oh, that's nice.
I am
yeah.
so used to smelling fire now that when it happened, I was like, oh, I guess something's on fire. And it never occurred to me that it was New York. I was just like, oh, I guess like California's burning again or Canada. And then I found out actually, no, no, you're actually on fire yourself this time.
Yeah.
Wow, that's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
And there's not enough New
so
York to
so
burn.
enough
We
of
have
that
like these little
call.
parks. That's what's on fire.
Yeah. Well, what better way to distract yourself from the world being on fire than to read some poems?
Oh, yeah.
You ready? You ready?
Let's
We'd
do
like
it.
to thank Christopher Brean Murray for being a brave poet who, I guess, being a poet in the first place is already brave. But then they were brave enough to submit to Painted by Quarterly. And then they were brave enough to say we could talk about their work on our show. So that's what we're about to do. We have 3 poems for Christopher Brean Murray. And we're starting off with a rather like a prose block. And I'm wondering, I don't think I should read today because of this cold. But who would like to?
I'd love to.
Thank you, Dagny. Kick us off.
Okay. Street scene. The officer said, "Thanks for your consideration." I'd never seen him before. He smelled like bourbon and codfish. A saber shined behind glass. Was this an embassy? Across the street, a distillery. Outside, a vagabond pissing into a tub of nasturtiums. A paperboy flung morning editions through the open windows of a tenement. A woman on a tricycle sped past, her dress dragging through puddles, her hair wild with neglect. In my pocket, I found a chunk of coral and a note that read, "The world is unfinished." I saw a merchant selling talc from a booth. He conversed with a couple but scanned me as I passed. A travel agency poster offered a trip to Valencia, yet the storefront window was cracked. Beside a butcher shop, a terrier barked while a mastiff slept. When were these streets last cleaned? I wondered. Is that the smell of a drained canal? I worried that I would be fined for some minor infraction. Steam seeped from a pipe. A corporal dropped some letters into the battered box on the corner. An undernourished locust tree went unnoticed by the children who played catch with an orange. I thought I would make my way to the port and board a ship for the Falklands. Or if I happened upon a railway station, I could finally visit Topeka. My cousin had promised me a job, but when was that? And weren't jobs scarce? In my mind's eye, I glimpsed a raging cataract and a thriving grove. A roe bounded and a breeze shivered an aspen. Would a train take me there? I advanced with purpose. Oh,
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you.
my pleasure. Gosh, what a piece. It's just
And
jam-packed with amazing detail. And there's something about it that makes me go, when? Because often with poems, when doesn't matter. But when here is kind of an interesting question. What do other people think?
If I may jump in, I was a bit quiet last podcast episode, but this one actually was very interesting to me because okay, this is a very niche um, connection that I made, but if you know anything about fashion, John Galliano made an artisanal show earlier this year in January, and he depicted these, a lot of people would say, tortured souls walking down the street coming from a night out, and it's very convoluted. A lot is going on, and that's what it reminds me of when I read this poem, because there's so much going on, but in a good way. Like, you have to dart your eyes. It's kind of when you're watching a video and there's so much going on, you have to watch it a couple of times to realize what each character is doing individually. And I like the fact that he incorporated all these details and played that story. It's like, in my head, I'm picturing like it's a dark, gloomy night. It's raining a little bit. It's like you're coming back from trying to get back from work, and you're darting your eyes trying to make sure you're safe, but you're also taking note of the individuals that are passing by or doing their actions, if that makes sense.
What a cool connection. I love that.
when you say when, you mean sort of like time of day, or you mean time of year, or you mean like
I think I
um
mean era.
okay.
I think I
Yeah.
mean I think I mean era. Yeah.
Well,
Dagny,
we
there
have
are a
a
lot of words that kind of point to that, and this kind of different era. So we have codfish and distillery and vagabond and tenement, merchant. It's just like, are we in the 1900s? It's a little bit skewed as to what the geography and the placement in time are uncertain. And there's also the questions that come throughout this prose block, which also point to uncertainty. Was this an embassy? When were these streets last cleaned? Is that the smell of a drained canal? Would a train take me there? It's like you can't quite pin it down. There's this wondering throughout.
Exactly. Like it feels early 20th century, and yet I don't know. Um,
we had the paper boy is flinging morning editions.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw it as dawn. Um, the yeah. I saw it as dawn, like still dusky though, like the sun's not all the way up for some reason.
Mm.
Um, but and I do think that's dated to have a paper boy flinging morning
Oh,
editions,
definitely. I mean, it definitely
right?
puts it before a certain date. Yeah.
Yeah,
Back
and
in
we
the
certainly
20th
don't have
century, I was a paperboy, and I delivered
Ah,
all of the morning editions before 6 a.m. every day.
yeah, and I was a
sure,
paper
sure, but that
girl.
was decades ago, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's even a travel agency, which I think those have gone away as well.
Well, and the modes of transportation too, because we've got the ship and the train, which you wouldn't necessarily think of immediately as a mode of transportation. And the woman riding a truck, that's not something you see every day.
Well,
I think,
I was thinking about what Davina said about that, kind of evoking that morning moment in a sort of bedraggled on your way home from somewhere morning, like kind of crossed with like Beauty and the Beast with like, Belle's, song about her town as she goes through as everything opens. And all of the details are so it's like that's surprising but inevitable, the way it's sort of this like pointillist. I would never think of a merchant selling talc from a booth. It's such like a weird image. And
Exactly.
yet, like it sort of fits into all these things. And there's this amazing disorientation that keeps happening. I could finally visit Topeka. It's like, what?
I know.
Topeka? And so it sort of keeps going back and forth between this sort of like, I don't know, Norman Rockwell Americana and this sort of distressed vagabond pissing into the tub of nasturtiums. There's and I think that light of the morning, as everything's sort of coming into focus, um, it it does leave us in a very interesting liminal space between that bacchanal before and the work day after.
And it's definitely combining the real with the absurd. I mean, it just does it again and again. You've already pulled out some examples, Jason, but also, an undernourished locust tree. Locust trees are invasive and tend to have no trouble taking over wherever they exist, and yet this one's sadly undernourished. I love the image of that.
Well, and went unnoticed by the children who played catch with it. Like, what child is like, oh, a locust tree. I must pay
Exactly.
attention. Like,
Yeah.
like that it's such like the expectation that these children playing catch with the orange would be paying attention, that this is remarked upon. They're not noticing it. Like,
Exactly.
I really like the question that he asked near the end, where he says, "My cousin had promised me a job, but when was that? And weren't jobs scarce?" And
Mhm.
echoing, I think, what all of us and other readers would think too about this. When was this? And I get the sense that he's some kind of time traveler in a way, and that
Mm.
because we get so many sensory details that aren't just visual, it almost has this virtual reality aspect to it, whereas like he's not looking at a painting and entering it, right? Like he is suddenly like woken up in this scene in a way that I find really compelling. It also makes me think of both Tobias Wolff's like Bullet in the Brain as well, like, and that kind of blend there about reality time and brain time. And then also Tracy Chevalier has a new book, The Glassmaker, where the protagonist doesn't age at a normal rate, so that we can get the entire history of the Venetian glass industry without changing the protagonists. And so I'm really interested in, maybe this possible like uptick in this interest of people living through different times. And it really feels different than like an acrostic poem.
Oh, I love all of that, Sam. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's interesting how completely I trust the voice. Like with in another set of hands, we might be discussing all of these as things that we want to know because we feel like the poem is lacking without them. And in this case, I feel like we're discussing these all as moments the poem evokes for us and creates these senses of possibility that we want to kind of stay in the poem to explore, not because we're lost, but because we're grounded, because we trust this voice.
I think you're right about that, Jason. It felt to me like a dreamscape, and I think there's also a dream logic that goes along with that. So even though, as you say, the children don't notice the locust tree, it's said with such assertion that you're like, oh yeah, okay. The children don't notice it because they're too busy playing catch with an orange, because that's something kids do, just the specificity of it kind of forestalls your doubt throughout this poem, and I really do like that. There's a little bit of humor in there too with this, especially towards the end, that in my mind's eye I glimpsed a raging cataract and a thriving grove. I love the wordplay in this,
Oh,
as
that's brilliant. Yeah.
yeah, with these great details.
Yeah. I was teaching the best American short stories to a fiction class, and I was noticing that in the previous edition to the current one, there was a lot of very like sort of disgruntled and slightly resigned narrators telling you about terrible things that had happened in a very calm voice. And one of the things that I really love about this is that I feel like I feel like the dominant mode of voice these days is a kind of disgruntled resignation and this sort of just wonder or the kind of directness or the just sort of like straightforwardness of it that doesn't kind of interpret what's happening, but just sort of seems like directly engaged in this sort of reportage, I thought was really wonderful. And I feel like everything that happens, I'm so engaged with because there's sort of no like there's simultaneously a sort of cheerful tone in that it seems engaged with us and interested that there's no way to see all of these things without being interested, but it's also just so direct, steam seeped from a pipe. A corporal drops some letters into the battered box in the corner. And there's something really, I don't know, I found something really pleasing in that voice's just direction in giving us just what's happening, as strange as what's happening is.
Yeah.
And not to discount the extent to which there's all this like direction of like interpretation as well.
Yeah, again, in other hands, it feels like the randomness that's at play here could be sort of distracting or um, just not feel very sophisticated. But here it just has this wonderful sense of inevitability. And you used the word grounded before, Jason, and I think that's what I'm responding to and why I trust this piece so much. Yeah.
I love that all those questions, and we don't know, like the speaker's barely in it. The speaker's only reporting, right?
Yeah.
And then toward the end, all those questions about what they might do. I might, make my way to the port and board a ship for the Falklands, or I could finally visit Topeka, right? And then the very last line, I advanced with purpose.
Yeah, it's suddenly invested with meaning for the speaker that hadn't been there before at all, Kathy. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. I really like that. It's almost like a twist ending,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
advanced
yeah.
with purpose because we don't know what their intentions are. Um, and I like the title and how that works with the whole thing as well. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that we do have two more by Christopher, so maybe we should take a vote so that we can get to the other juicy ones.
Sounds good.
My thumbs are ready.
Yeah.
Well, only one thumb.
Okay.
I only get
Okay,
one vote.
let's do this. 1, 2, 3, vote. And surprise, surprise, it's unanimously in. Woo! Wonderful. Okay, thank you, Christopher Brean Murray. And we are now going to look at Oslo. Who would like to do that one?
I can jump in.
Thank you, Jason.
All right. Oslo. The proverb reads, Night's current does not push translunary gifts towards the vibrating hives. At least, that's what the leaflet said. It spoke also of purple cliffs and a metaphorical grotto, while attributing many misunderstandings to the voluminous reports. I had a rather loosely constructed worldview myself. Dagger wings fluttered over prairies of doubt, and terra firma drifted like a raft on Lake Superior. I jettisoned some notions and denuded a few truths until the whole fortress was porous like a yurt in a stiff wind. Meanwhile, delphinium flourished in the rain-spattered pasture. A foray was in order, a jaunt over tundra or towards a sandbar in which a meteor fragment is lodged. Zip codes shuffled themselves as we slept, the theorist claimed, yet his treatise smelled like a stale valise. There were the heavy duffels of grief. We took turns lugging them uphill, and they rolled back down in the dream. A boy found a jawbone in the weeds, but the top story was still the defaced painting no one cared about the previous day. It depicted a lagoon fringed with bellflowers. On the water's surface, an errant cloud. Yet in the background, I thought I glimpsed a staticky portal. But this was precisely the portion that had been defaced. Soon, other narratives surfaced. The missing magnate and his drifting skiff, the nuclear silo now a bed and breakfast, a zephyr caressed a neglected carport, a stallion traversed a meadow. I received a text from a man in Oslo who wanted to know the password.
Nice read.
Thanks.
I love that the last two lines. That's just what an ender.
Slush, this dead silence. Nothing's wrong with your audio. It is the sound of thinking.
The first half of the poem in particular seems to be about drowning and misinformation and disinformation. That's kind of the vibe I got with the sort of modern life. And feeling like the ground's been pulled from under us with terra firma drifting like a raft on Lake Superior. I love that.
This isn't a proverb that people know, right? I'm just making sure, right?
Yeah.
We think that this is something that is invented, which I like because it almost feels like, such an antithesis between proverb and leaflet. I think it's great. It's a great opening.
It's a brilliant opening. I assumed it was a made-up proverb for the poem, but interested to know if anybody thinks it's a take on an actual one.
There's a line in a James Longenbach essay where he says that we could call the cow that jumped over the moon translunar, but it wouldn't be as much fun. And so there were, he's not a very, I mean, translunar is not a very common word. And translunar
No, yeah.
is really kind of wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
But no, it felt like that whole sort of simulacra of erudition, kind of creating something that sounds impenetrable, so it must be smart, but is actually completely empty.
Yeah.
It reads like a fortune cookie fortune to me a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And it makes me really think about how when I first read something like the proverb reads, I get, this anticipatory feeling that wisdom is about to be given to me and how exciting that is. And how, they say that when people are confronted with misinformation, they double down on it sometimes, you know? And,
Yes.
you know, I keep reading it again to look actually for the wisdom that might be around the corner of the words or something.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Mhm.
And it happens twice in the poem that, you know, the thing is undone, right? That you get the proverb, and then you're like, what? And then it's like, at least that's what the leaflet said.
Yeah.
And then later, when the zip codes are shuffling themselves as we sleep, right, the theorist claimed. And so there's this really interesting moment of presenting something that feels like it's coming directly from the authorial or the speaker's voice, that is then like, oh, but that's what someone else said, and I'm not really clear, like kind of undercutting it as something received and maybe accepted, maybe not, engaged, but not, you know, kind of taken on. Um, and I think that that works really well throughout the poem. I think that that kind of felt to me like kind of the heart of the poem, sort of like presenting the things to withdraw them.
And Jason, that goes to the line too with I jettisoned some notions and denuded a few truths.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe the speaker is counteracting this assumed knowledge that's being sent from others.
They seem to be admitting to vulnerability, you know, because continuing that, Lisa, it says until the whole fortress was porous, like a yurt in a stiff wind, which I just love. That's amazing. Yeah.
I feel like that might be the first time those words have ever been put together.
Yes, yes,
Like
exactly.
a yurt and a stiff wind.
Davina, where are you on this? What are you thinking about?
For me, I won't lie. When I first read it was a little hard for me to digest. There was a lot of language that I wasn't used to. I was flipping through it and trying to translate it into a way that I could understand. So this one was a little hard for me to digest, honestly.
And yeah, and Davina, I think the poem's working to enact that kind of inscrutability and you know and to me it really echoes today and the world that we live in. You know, I mentioned before the idea of dis and misinformation and misdirection, which I think our lives are just, you know, full of. And I feel like the poem is beautifully enacting that by yeah, using that more challenging language and like these turns of phrase that make you go, well, what?
Since Marion isn't here, I'll float the devil's advocate argument that Defina mentions. In this one, I think that the thread is a little harder to follow than the first one, and I think for me it's the perhaps the shifting point of view, because we kind of enter with this abstraction, and then we have an I. The I had the rather loosely constructed worldview, and that shifts midway through the poem to a we, and then we have the boy, uh, and then it goes back to the I. So it was a little harder for me to ride the through line of this poem. The logic didn't seem as cohesive as the first one. I never doubted the point of view in the first poem.
Completely agree. Not only the point of view that was quite hard to follow, but just overall the story. It was just very convoluted, but not, and there's nothing wrong with a poem being abstract, but when it's too abstract, it's just a little hard to look at, or in this case, read. So even though I went over it a couple of times, I still up to now just don't get it. And that just might be due to like my ignorance on some type of forefront, but that's just where I stand currently.
Well, Davina, I like that. It's a nice point to mention too that there's a new study out that says that people are more likely to rate AI poetry as being written by humans than by AI, and that AI poetry is found to be more accessible. So I just thought that was kind of interesting to tuck in with what you've just said. But I also agree with what you've just said. You have to decide at what point is a poem maybe leaning too heavily into being inscrutable. Yeah.
It's like we want to know the password, right? On the end of the line.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this poem knows this, right? Right. But are there enough clues? I don't know. It's a question of, do you go back and start looking for meaning in them?
I mean, the diction is such a pleasure. Like I'm willing to kind of keep going through it, honestly, just because I love these word choices, honestly.
But it shows how much work the street scene was doing in the first poem. That the street scene was part of what kept us grounded, the speaking to the officer, the seeing the people. And because this one is more self-consciously in the dream, in the intellect, in the thought process, without that ground of the street scene, without the sense of like physicality, um, we do feel a little bit more adrift. Like at first, I thought that was an effect of the vocabulary and the diction, but I think it's actually not having the same physical location.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that it's less accessible than the first one, but I think I lean into what Sam said that I don't mind. You guys know, slushies might even know from if they're listeners, um that I usually like things to be pretty literal. I take things very, literally, and I don't mind not knowing what the story really is on this one, just because the language is great. I do believe I'd flip right back to the first line again, not really looking for meaning, but to experience it again. So that said, is it time we vote, or do we need to talk more?
I think so. I think let's do it.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, vote. Did well, slushies. I gotta what happened to Sam? So what happened is Sam got
Oh,
raptured, I think.
this happens. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, and the reason why we're looking for Sam suddenly is because the vote was a stalemate.
Oh, and
No,
she
she
has
she voted in the
voted.
chat.
She's voted in
Oh,
the chat.
okay.
There we go.
Votes in the chat.
And she's voted ahead too, which is great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's in. Yay. So, we have now accepted the street scene and Oslo, and we have one more.
Okay.
Lisa, I'm afraid it is on you if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Thank you. Can I? Yeah,
Sure,
yeah,
go ahead.
nothing. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay, true account. At the end of the trail, I glimpsed a humming nook of activity. It wasn't metallic, yet it shined. Not liquid, yet it sloshed and gurgled. A squirrel approached it and stood on hind legs before darting away over needles. It produced a synthetic odor that was mildly intoxicating. Everything around it was blurry, or were my glasses fogged? The sound it made was soothing, like a hand caressing sanded wood. Then the whole thing shook, flickered, and morphed into a voice formulating a bewildering sentence. There were pauses, and in them other voices arose, some critiquing the primary one, others elaborating on ideas only suggested by the initial oration. I took no notes. I couldn't keep up. New voices had coiled around my own interior monologue. I felt like a blimp, lost in a system of caves, delving deep into the earth as a spotlight scans the walls scrawled with bison and deer and the visage of a hunter whose concerns are divorced from our own. Even those caves filled with voices, inquisitive, morose, plaintive, shrill, consoling, and dismissive. Irate iterations and blanket condemnations strove to eclipse terse pronouncements of enduring wisdom. Infantile babbling percolated amidst the gossip of fools. One voice said, "Confess," as if into a well of wastrels. Another recited terms and conditions without end. I thought I might chew through my cheeks. The voices melded into an intolerable buzzing, a mandala of jabber, an encyclopedia of interruptions, an anthology of blog posts scat sung over crimes of a distracted quintet. Eventually, the noise dissipated. I wiped the drool from my chin. A squirrel eyed me from a branch. I'd somehow lost my watch. I needed to go. I was late for a lecture.
Oh, nice, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
So this is the one that I feel least grounded within. So I know we mentioned that feeling of being in more of a dream state in the last poem, but for me, there was a lot of things to hang on to in that poem and that I wanted to circle back to. This one I find a lot heavier to move through, but also without a sense of being grounded. How do others feel about it?
That's interesting, Dagny, because in the previous poem, you mentioned that it mimics social media and disinformation. And that's what this poem does for me. It really felt like whatever this weird thing that the squirrel finds at the end of the trail, the metallic, shimmering, sloshing, gurgling thing, is kind of mimicked that uh dislocation of diving into a doom scroll. And there's this babble of voices, and this one really long sentence, or a couple sentences in the middle. I took no notes. I couldn't keep up. New voices had coiled around. And the idea of being a blimp lost in a system of caves. uh it just I think this with the cave with the voices and all those descriptions, it mimicked for me like that fast scrolling of like going through TikTok or Instagram, and it's happy, sad, advertisement, beautiful piece in the forest, and just your brain just kind of shuts off. Uh and I think that part about the well, I love the well of wastrels. And I also thought this other one had a nice moment of humor with this, um, the recitation of terms and conditions without end. That also brought me to, social media, or the thing you must click OK to without understanding. But I'll let someone else have a chance.
See, this is why I'm loving this discussion, mainly because it seems as though when I'm on my own, I can't figure out. I had this idea that it was an influx of information that was going in and out, especially going through that cave as a blimp, all those carvings on the wall. That one I understood, but the idea that it was related to social media somehow flew over my head. So I'm really glad that we were able to sit down and dissect that. I guess I missed the squirrel with the metallic features, so I'm glad that like you guys brought it up to me.
Yeah, this one felt like to me like there was a center of gravity that was sort of like the other ones felt like kind of tops that kept spinning. Like the center of gravity was perfectly located so that the gyroscopic action could kind of just continue the swirl. And in this one, there are a couple of centers of gravity that kind of pull it to one side for me. So like one voice said confess, as if into a well of wastrels. Another recited terms and conditions without ends. I thought I might chew through my cheeks. Like there's such a distress that emerges, and then to sort of just be late for the lecture. Like it felt to me like there were a number of places where the poem is kind of pulling in one direction and hasn't kind of found that balance yet. Whereas in the other poems, and I know it's terrible to make people compete with their own work, because we all love the first poem so much that we get to the second poem, we're like, why don't you do what you already did? It's like, because I can't. I already did it. Um, it's not fair to hold what you liked against me. Um, but with this one, I do have this sense that like the calibration isn't quite right. There's something really distressing that needs to be allowed to emerge more completely, that sort of keeps getting submerged in a way that I couldn't forget that it was there.
Yeah, that's really, I think, putting into words how I'm feeling, Jason. And I think it's just that I feel like there's more telling in this poem, and it's telling through a lot of descriptors, and there just aren't the same things to hang on to and return to help, I guess, create that you know, the centers of gravity that you're referring to. So for me, I'm just feeling, although I can see what I think the project of this poem is, and I agree with you know, Lisa's observations, and Davina, I couldn't agree with you more about it's, you always pull more meaning out of these discussions because it's hard to do it alone. Yeah, I'm still just kind of feeling a little lost with this one.
You know how Davina said that the language, like she was finding herself having to translate in the second poem, almost translate it to herself to make it more digestible. Um, this, while I really respect the diversity of these three poems, you know, and when people do ask me, should I submit a range of what I do, I always tell them yes, right? So I really do respect the three as a package because they think they do show diversity. But this was the first one that gave me, you know, me with my eye roll. I got a bit of an eye roll, a bit of a trying too hard, reaching for language that's not accessible. You know, let me see how clever I can be. You know, we keep talking about that section with the voices, and you know that list: inquisitive, morose, plaintive, shrill, consoling. When I see something like that, I always think, I'm glad you had a good time, but maybe you should have edited that too. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that was fun for you to think of all those words, but the list is not really helpful. And then the infantile babbling percolated and missed the gossip of fools. Just that's where I really get the eye roll of like, what am I trying to say? You know, from what post are you pronouncing this? Right? Uh and it just, yeah, it kind of it irks me. And none of the other ones did. Even though they all use not easy language, if
But
that makes sense.
we used to say, I feel like I haven't said this in a while, but we used to say like, you know, when we loved a poem but we didn't think it was right for publication, I want this person in my MFA program, right? Like I see the talent,
Mhm,
like I
mhm,
see the energy, I see everything, and I really want to sort of like guide this somewhere. And so with the first two poems, I very much had like the sense that these were finished poems. With this one, I'm like, I love the talent, I love the energy, I love the images, I love all of the, you know, structuring devices, but I also want like to mark it up and like ask for some
mhm,
pages.
mhm.
Like
Right,
I want to be able
right.
to like talk about like what's next for this particular poem,
Yeah,
what it's pointing you towards, rather than kind of saying like, yes, this one, like let's put it
right.
in the hands of our readers.
Absolutely. I want to workshop this one and would enjoy it. Think of how much fun would that be to
Oh my
work
God.
on this.
Yeah.
Because there is so much that's good too, for sure.
Oh my God. I mean, it's and I mean part of what I mean is that there are like three or four kind of it's pushing in all these different directions, and any one of them will be a fantastic um piece. And we get to see it at this we're lucky that we get to see it at this moment of development, and slushies, you are lucky that you get to see it. And we thank Christopher Brean Murray for letting us share that moment of vulnerability and exploration.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm kind of feeling that it's time to vote.
I think it's time to
Yeah.
vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do it. One, two, three, vote. Oh my goodness. Wait a minute.
We tied.
We tied.
We tied.
We're tied.
Yeah, we tied. Okay. So, Marion is kissing elephants in Thailand right now, so she couldn't be with us. But we'll grab her and have her take a look and be the deciding vote. And slushies, we will definitely have that answer by the time we post this, so you'll know.
Wait, we can't have a cliffhanger? We can't like
Well, we
have
we
slushies
could.
on tenterhooks?
We could force people to go to the site, and we
Yeah.
could write this part up in the notes.
And what about the poor poet?
The poet really doesn't.
He's
The poet
listening
will
to
have
the
to
very
wait.
end.
Right. Well, the poet always finds out before the show gets up on
Okay,
the
good.
site. So I think we will let the poet know.
Nice.
Once Marion is able to make an answer. But yeah, sure, we can force everybody to go to the site. Should we vote on that? Do we want to force our listeners to go? Okay. All right, let's do it.
All right.
All right. 1, 2, 3, vote. Okay. That's fun news. Thank you so much, Christopher Brean Murray.
Oh.
Really and truly. Now everybody sees the bravery of which I spoke about at the beginning, having no idea how things would go, how this convo would go by the end. Yeah, just to remind slushies, we don't discuss these at all. The most we do is send out the 3 and go, hey, would this work? And 1 or 2 of us respond yes, and then that's it. So there's no prior conversation ahead of time. What you see is unscripted and unrehearsed, or what you hear, I should say. You probably could tell that it's unscripted and unrehearsed. Oh, we do our best, and we know that you do too. And does anybody have anything else they would like to say before we sign off? Okay, stay safe and keep reading. Woohoo!
Woo! Bye, everybody.
Bye.